because I feel like we have so little time to talk. I'm going to add the rest of my video to the end of this that I'm recording now, but I just want to say that um, how I got out is very much just my story on how I got free and how I found deliverance in God's Word. Every person is different, and for some people, they've tried it and it hasn't worked for them. I can tell you that God's Word works and it's effective when you trust in that as your deliverance. And I know that's controversial because people could then come back and say, well, I've trusted God and it didn't work for me. I can't explain that to you. I really don't. And like I said, if I could do counseling myself, I would have. And if that would have been the thing that got me free, I would have done that. But for me, it wasn't counseling that I needed. It was God's Word. So each person is different. I don't want you guys coming for me like, I tried it. I went to church. I prayed. I begged God. I don't know what happened there. And I'm not going to try to assume or give you answers. This video isn't to provide satisfactory answers. It's just to tell you how I got free and to give people an open space to if they want to discuss sexual assault. Because in the church, I feel that it's so hush hush. It's so, people are like, oh, we don't talk about that. It's just not polite conversation, but it happens. So we are going to talk. After I developed the distrust I had for men, I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. I felt like it was totally normal for a woman to not be attracted to men. I could do a whole nother video on like sexual attraction, physical attraction after sexual assault. Maybe I will. Maybe I will talk about that again, but I'm not gonna do that right now. What I will do is bring out the important points of this is that how I felt towards men, my attitude towards men was based off of my experience in sexual assault. I had never experienced God's love the way I have since I became born again. Um, and not only just born again, because afterwards I was dealing with a lot of stuff, but it was like when I encountered the cross of Calvary, when I thought about what he took on for me, and I began to meditate on it. I remember going to a Bible study, uh, and it was so word based. And the person who was leading the Bible study was my brother, and he was talking about the cross. And he wasn't even coming to preach that. He wasn't coming, the Bible study wasn't supposed to be about the cross of Calvary. It was supposed to be about something else. And he was just like, man, I just feel like so much led to talk about this. So he just went off into everything that Jesus went through, the sexually perverted things that the Romans did back in that day, that the cross of Calvary could have meant more than just physical abuse. It could have been sexually. And he just started to go into how Jesus, no matter what he went through on that cross, he is touched with the feelings of our infirmity. And so he went through everything that Yeshua went through, from the time that the Roman soldiers captured him to the time of his resurrection. And by the end of that study, I was wrecked. I was wrecked. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so in love with him. And there was like this thing that came over me, and it never left. I started to walk with God, and slowly I walked away from the sin and the things that I had been using to pacify and numb my feelings. I began to actually feel stuff, and I went through an emotional roller coaster. I went up, I went down, I went all the way around, but I came back to Christ. And that is the part of the story that I left out when I originally told it. So stay tuned for the second part. I'll be dressed different. The light will be better. It'll be all good. Okay, to start, I have to start by saying I watched my friend Dennis's Dear Dad series, which I will actually link the video to that. It's an open letter that he wrote to his dad, it is so raw. It talks about like so many issues that men face. One being just like pornography. And it, when I say it's so raw, it is so raw. That was very, very brave of him. And I'm gonna link it because I think it's very good as far as mental health. It doesn't really get off into sexual abuse, which is something we're gonna cover today. But I just think it's valid. Let's talk about the aftermath. Afterwards, I experienced a time where I didn't want to eat. I lost the joy that I used to have. I remember distinctly several times just bursting out crying in tears when my other classmates were so excited about things. I remember just being so sad that these things didn't make me happy. And I remember going through a long period of time where I would just shut myself into a room with a blanket over my head, and I didn't want to be around other people. I didn't want to. I had lost the flair I had for life. Up until this incident, I still played with Barbies, so you can just imagine how shattered my world was because I know I didn't even want to play with Barbies afterwards. I was like, okay. I was 14, I was still playing with Barbies. So that shows you how innocent like my thinking was, and afterwards it was like I became a different person. I learned how to just really survey a room and kind of take emotional inventory on other people. I began to just like put myself last and everybody else first. And I think that was the spiraling. So rock bottom. Rock bottom became drinking constantly. Rock bottom looked like, just dressing just totally inappropriate. Even after becoming born again, like just dressing totally inappropriate. Like so much skin out, so much cleavage, so much just totally like just inappropriate, way inappropriate for the occasion. And um, it didn't act. I wouldn't say it was sexually deviant behavior. It was just stuff that I would do. Um, that I decided at that moment in rock bottom that I am now going to have control over my own sexuality. I'm not going to let anybody define my sexuality and how I should be because somebody did before, and I will never let anybody have control over me in that way. So rock bottom looked like, dressing really provocatively, but if any guy approached me wrong, actually being offended, like, did you just look at my cleavage? Yeah, it's out there for the whole world. But rock bottom looked like coming home so wasted, just thanking God I even made it home. Coming home, forgetting my name, forgetting the events of the last night. And rock bottom looked like just partying constantly, just anything goes as far as like the type of friends I kept. I had no standard for those guys. Like I would literally be friends with all kinds of people, and people that didn't really mean me well. Rock bottom looked like getting so desperate in a relationship that I just closed myself off in a room with a bottle of alcohol, and just being so totally just lost. The light at the end of the tunnel was really God's word. It sounds so cheap and so cliche, and it sounds so simple, but for me, when I began to meditate on the God of the Bible, not the one some of these majority of these churches preach, the one that is willing to kill you if you step out of line. But honestly, it was when I began to meditate on the love of God that freedom came. And freedom came in the form of His Word. I remember just going to a Bible study that my brother was holding, and I'm talking about years later. I was 26. And he was holding a Bible study, and he talked about what Jesus endured on the cross. And when I say freedom came that day, I began to break down. It was like God broke down every wall that I had up. And every form of protection I had for myself was just gone. All my defenses were gone. Like, every excuse I made for walking away from his presence was just gone. Um, and that's what freedom looked like for me. That was the light at the end of the tunnel when I could finally feel something. So, freedom came by constantly being in God's Word, being in the fellowship of other believers. Um, After being violently sexually assaulted, I had this anxiety when men would come around, like, what are they going to do to me? Being alone with a man, it would just send me into an internal state of chaos. So, um, I remember, the guys of our church, we were very like huggy because I started going to a new church. I moved to Fort Wayne, and I became a part of Terrence Shivers Ministries, and I became an active member. And everybody, what I noticed there is that everybody was hugging everybody. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to be a weirdo. So I started hugging everybody. And when I did, it was like years, I think it was like a couple years into being there. We were having a service, and it was like, I realized, like, I feel so safe in the company of these men. These men, I feel the company, the safety in their company. And I was like, wow, I am free. I am free. Like, I'm not in this bondage anymore. Like, the depression had left. The bondage had left. Fear left. And I think if a person is ever going to be totally free, that they have to feel some kind of peace and some kind of safety in the company of others. They have to feel loved in the church. And that's what freedom looked like for me. Get someone involved in your struggle when you say, um, out loud to yourself what happened first, and then tell someone you trust. It's gonna take some time for some of you. It took me years to even admit it to my mother. 12 years, like I said, 12 years a slave to that, to molestation. But when you told your truth to someone, there's other work that has to be done on your mind, will, and emotions. There's going to be some things that you have to do as far as your mental safety. First, if you are able to escape it, get out of there. Don't stay. They don't change. Until something radical happens. And if you're waiting for that, honey, you're waiting for a miracle to happen in their lives. And it will be just easier for you to remove yourself from an unsafe situation. But secondly, for your mental health, you're going to have to cut off the things that you're doing to numb the pain, because you're going to have to feel something. And feeling something is not easy. And that when you feel that discomfort, you're going to do something about it. And you're going to work on your mental health. You're going to seek help. You're going to go to counselors. You're going to speak to someone. There are some resources that I will link to at the end of this video, where you're probably going to have to go through some major counseling. I'd love to go through counseling. I just never went through that kind of counseling. It's just like God's word made me free. But I understand that is a whole nother video. And I maybe do a video just on how the word made me free in so many areas, not just sexual abuse. There's so many things I've been delivered from, but that's just one of them. That's the source. That's the root cause. But then there are other symptoms. So I want you to know that if you're going through it now, I love you. And I'm praying. And there is light. And there's hope. And sorry to come so heavy for some of you who don't know what I'm talking about. You're blessed. You're blessed. Take it as a blessing. This video may not be for you. This content may not be for you. But trust me, there is hardly a person on the face of this earth who has not been touched in some way by sexual assault, that their family has not been touched by sexual assault. You may not know it. You might not be a person that other people feel that they can confide in. But as I begin to share and tell my story, people begin to open up to me about things they had gone through mental health wise, like depressions they faced. And not only that, about sexual assault. So be an ear. If you never experienced this, be open to hearing people's story. Love you guys, and I'm out.